Thanks for downloading this episode of On the Record Online with Eric Schwartzman, the podcast about how technology is changing the world of communications. To subscribe to the podcast or share feedback, visit us online at ontherecordpodcast.com, on Twitter at ontherecord, or send email to ontherecordpodcast@gmail.com.
My guest today is Joe Ciarallo. He is the Director of Communications at Buddy Media, and I am pleased to have him with me on this podcast. Joe, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric. Happy to be here.
So the report, Strategies for Effective Facebook Wall Posts, was all the buzz. I know a lot of people were looking at it for some guidance on how to be more effective marketing through Facebook pages, because the truth is, I think most marketers, post to their Facebook page and all they really get back are crickets. So I mean, I guess the question becomes, what sort of basic rules of thumb do you have for us in terms of, how to effectively market through a Facebook page?
Sure. Well, absolutely. So, we are not an agency. We're a technology company that provides, that helps brands market on Facebook. And so a lot of people ask us that same question, right? They're working with our tools and they're posting and saying, how do I get more engagement? How do I get more conversions through my page? So this is 200 brands over a 2-week period that we looked at all their posts. So a lot of the interesting things that we found here, one of the most interesting things is that we lead the study off with is keep it short and sweet, right? Facebook is a lot like Twitter. So posts that were 80 characters or less had almost 30% higher engagement rate. Yet those short posts that are 80 characters or less only accounted for 19% of all the posts that we looked at. So while they have higher engagement rate, they're not the norm. So we thought that was interesting. A second finding that we thought was really interesting was to look twice before you use URL shorteners. And if you're going to use a URL shortener, look at obviously using a brand-specific URL shortener, right? A lot of brands are using specific URL shorteners, so their community gets used to those shorteners. They don't see a URL shortener or a URL that they're not familiar with. Long URLs saw 3 times less engagement rate. So that was something interesting to me. So use either the full-length URL, so people can say, okay, they're pointing me to a New York Times link or to a link on their website, or use a branded short URL, so your users and your community are familiar with that.
If someone's going to do a custom URL, do you recommend you get a Bitly Pro account and you buy the URL and put it into a system like that?
That's worked very well. Again, something that we can obviously do that via our platform. There's other platforms that like Bitly that you mentioned that can do that. So I think yes, you want to be consistent and you want to use a program like that gives you some sophisticated analytics. And again, that's becoming the standard for a lot of brands, right? I guess maybe a year or so ago, there weren't as many brands using that, but now people are pretty used to that, especially with a lot of the larger media companies using them. So people are seeing those links percolate around the web more, especially for news stories now, whether it's Mashable, and obviously Facebook has their own URL shortener, the New York Times. So people are seeing those links more, so they're feeling more comfortable with them.
So just so people are clear on the methodology of this report, this was 200 brands. Most of them are recognizable brands, so people know them. They have an audience.
Yes.
And over what period of time? Over how long?
Sure. We looked at all their posts for a 2-week period.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Of all these different recognizable brands that you looked at, are there any sort of trends you could draw with respect to purchase consideration? What I'm wondering is if it's, the Harley-Davidson community, which I would imagine is a pretty invested community, do they have more patience for a post longer than 80 words than, say, Coke? or a more fickle community that's not necessarily that engaged?
Sure. What we found in that regard is we did a lot of keyword research, actually. So I don't have anything specific in terms of length, by brand or length by industry. But what was interesting was looking at a lot of the keywords. So a lot of brands are looking to run contests, sweepstakes, or things like that. Potentially even, a lot of brands are also doing couponing. So we saw a very high engagement rate with the words events and winning. And we saw a lower engagement rate with the words contest and promotion. So why? Well, that's what we're looking to try to figure out why. What we are looking at is that people want to be associated with an event or a winner, right? The word new actually was towards the top as well. So new content or a new contest. But the actual word contest and the word promotion didn't do as well, because people really like these sort of what we called softer sell keywords, right? They're still talking about the same kinds of things, but they're not overly promotional. Promotional keywords such as shop, sale, free shipping, save, they actually performed towards the bottom in terms of engagement in our keyword analysis. So that's something that we looked at in terms of conversions that we found really interesting.
When you look at, trying to get as much engagement as you can so that you show up as a top post under the top news, algorithmic edge rank order of a Facebook news feed.
Sure.
Do you get into the specifics of luring likes versus comments, or is it pretty much you're just trying to get engagement?
You obviously want engagement, and but obviously there are comments are weighted heavier in Facebook's edge rank. So you want comments over likes, right? Likes are easier to get. And we actually, in a separate report we put out just on EdgeRank, we talk a lot about this and how you can boost your presence in the newsfeed, and I can touch on some of the high-level parts of that. But basically, EdgeRank is similar to, in a way, it's similar to Google PageRank in that there's not a lot disclosed publicly from Facebook about EdgeRank, right? So they don't really talk about how the sausage is made in the same way Google doesn't, right? Because they want to make sure people aren't, frankly, gaming it. And Google, as we all know, is constantly refining their search algorithm to make sure it's not being gamed or manipulated. So same with Facebook. There's not really a lot of public information from Facebook about that. So, but what we do know is that it does look at comments heavier than likes. And we do have a report on that was separate than this. And there's some more I can talk to you about that. But I recommend people just look around on our site. They can download the white paper on EdgeRank. TechCrunch also has a really good post up on sort of what they call the secret sauce of EdgeRank. There is a rough formula for newsfeed optimization, which is basically sort of the edge type, which they look at comments, likes, tags, etc. And they also do include a decay factor, right? So how long the post stays active.
And are there any other sort of top line findings on this EdgeRank report you want to mention to us? I will put a link in the show notes. So if you just hop on over to ontherecordpodcast.com and load the show notes for this show, I'll have a link to both of the Buddy Media reports. But any other sort of top line findings from the EdgeRank report you want to share?
Yeah. So what we also do know is that they look at also your affinity. So if it's someone that you connect with often versus someone you haven't connected with in a while, that also factors in. And also, as I mentioned before, time. So the older something is, the less important it comes. So those are a few of the things that we found. And what we looked at in the report was also sort of so the report is basically the basics of EdgeRank, right? The basic info we do know, but then what can brands do to boost this, right? So what are some of the strategies they can do? So here's an interesting example. I was speaking with Ekaterina Walker, who's a social media strategist at Intel at South by Southwest this past year, and she mentioned that she actually loves it when someone maybe will come onto their page and, you know, maybe correct a spelling error or point out, you know, things like that, because then sometimes you can like even get into a debate with them, you know, or sometimes I'm like, you guys messed this up, you spelled it wrong, and then she'll hop in and leave a comment, and that'll end up, you know, creating a string of maybe 10 or 15 comments on whatever the topic is they're debating, all generated off of like a question about a spelling error or someone complaining about a spelling error. So her point was that, you know, you turn those negative or those, you know, sort of nitpicky comments into an opportunity to boost the conversation. She's like, I love this because it's just boosting, you know, the comments on our post, and then hence boosting our EdgeRank.
Now, I recently, my wife had friended a mom of another kid at the school where my kid goes to school, and she showed me her Facebook newsfeed. She's like, "Oh my God, this woman Jody put something on her newsfeed, and she has 54 comments. I've never seen anything like that." And we clicked on the comments, and it was Jody and one other mom from the school having a conversation.
Yeah.
And there were just 50.
There you go.
It was just those two. Nobody else even entered. And it was topping out her news feed for top news for, you know, a good 24 hours. So, I mean, does it not really matter how many different people are in the discussion? Can it just be two people? And do you think that, you know, people will start to game that?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know if the number of people, that's something I have to look up. I don't know if the number of people affect something like that. I would assume, and again, I can share the report with your audience to download. I would assume it does, because again, Facebook doesn't want you to just you know, get in a back and forth forever with one person, right? I think you just, like you mentioned, instruct one person to continue to comment, and then what does that really do for anybody?
And, you know, my wife's a pretty standard user. I mean, she has like 130, 135 friends, average number. So, you know, for her, for someone to wind up at the top of her feed is going to be, you know, a lot easier than a social media marketer with 1,000 or 2,000 friends.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So what I want to do is I want to drill down a little brass tacks on the strategies for effective Facebook wall posts report, because in there there are a bunch of really interesting word clouds that show you, you know, what posts are most likely to either get liked or commented based on the certain words that they were using. And one of them says most liked posts include the following words, and the first word was like, the second word was take, and the third word was submit. But there are no real examples in the report of how you might use those terms in a Facebook wall post. So I was hoping you might talk to us about that a little bit. Yeah.
So again, what we find here, and an overall finding is the simpler the better, right? So if you want someone to like something, right? Like sometimes brands will do, you know, I'm just using this as an example. I don't know if they've actually done this, you know, like a sports league will say, you know, like this post if you're a fan of whatever team, right? Or like this post if you're watching the game tonight, right? So it's very simple. Like, I'm going to watch the game tonight, I'm going to like this. Or maybe that, you know, a media company may say, you know, do you agree with this topic, right? They'll post like almost like a poll. Well, now they can post polls on this, but they'll post questions and say, like this if you agree, right? So they're using that word in there and making it really simple. And then the interesting thing was, you know, we also had a keyword cloud for the most effective way to generate comments, right? So the ones you mentioned, like, take, and submit, were the most effective for generating likes. For generating comments, it was the top three keywords were post, comment, and tell us, right? So again, really simple, right? Tell us what you think of the new pretzel crisps flavor, right? Comment here if you'd like to see, Doritos, launch this ad on the Super Bowl, right? So you're really spelling it out, the action you want people to take. The simpler, the better.
To what extent, I mean, where do you draw the line as a marketer, for not being seen as pandering? Because I start to see people now post to their Facebook walls things like, like this post if you're proud to be an American. I saw that, from a few people on the 4th of July, and you kind of roll your eyes and say, oh my God, really? I mean, you really think I'm that stupid? I mean, how do you sort of decide, what is a good way to use these words and what's, pandering?
Exactly. I mean, you don't want to overuse it, right? And you don't want to be pandering, obviously. I mean, each community manager and each brand knows their brand best, right? And I think that's the key, is take the findings and apply them to your community. And sometimes you can do fun posts like that, right? If you're Macy's, right? So for the 4th of July, right? Instead of just like if you're American, maybe Macy's post say, hey, like this post if you'll be joining us for the Macy's fireworks tonight or something, right? It's more specific to their brand. A lot of people obviously will be attending the fireworks still, and it's a good way to even remind them. Or, the fireworks start at 9 o'clock. Make sure you're there early. Don't even just do the like post, right? Actually give them information that's valuable to them. So I think you need to strike a balance, and I think that a lot of brands are very eager to boost their edge rank, obviously very eager to boost their fan count, and I think that though a lot of brands now are realizing that fan count is great. What brand is not going to want 1 million fans? And if you show me a brand that has 1 million fans, they probably want 2 million or 5 million. But they also realize now that, the engagement and what's happening on their presence on Facebook is much more important, right? If they can build up 1 million fans through maybe a contest or something, and that's great. It's people engaging with them because hopefully the contest is valuable or interesting to them. But then how do you keep them around, right? How do you keep them coming back? What's the strategy? And that's the whole point of a Facebook page, right? It's a community. And this content has only been around for 2.5 years. It seems like forever, but really we couldn't even like a brand before March 2009. So once that happened and they launched the Pages product, that's when I think a lot of brands had this light bulb moment of, wow, now we're going from maybe, dabbling in Facebook, launching an app or sponsoring a pre-existing app out there, to now we have our own sort of home base that's 24/7, 365.
So a few months back, LinkedIn launched something called LinkedIn Today. And basically it's a service that allows you to see the news that your friends are sharing based on a given industry. And so, I remember once I posted to a group that I'm a member of on LinkedIn, my question was, what do you think of LinkedIn Today? And I capitalized LinkedIn and I capitalized the T in today and I put a question mark. And I got so much engagement and so much response. I was a top influencer in the group. I mean, it was, it maxed out as the most popular discussion. But people didn't answer the question what they thought of LinkedIn Today, the news service. They just answered, oh, I think LinkedIn is great. I use it all the time. It was that type of a thing, right? Now, one of the findings from this Strategies for Effective Facebook Wall posts was, don't ask why, ask where, when, would, and should, and then it shows the types of questions most likely to get responded. The first was where, then when, then would. Can you talk to us a little bit how you would use where, when, and would in a share that would be most likely to encourage engagement?
Sure. So just taking a step back, right? Why can be, what we found is why can be perceived as intrusive and or challenging, right? When you ask someone why, it involves more of an explanation, frankly, than say, again, going back to the sports team example, the St. Louis Cardinals post, hey, when are you headed out to the park tonight, right? Or we have a pregame festivity going on, when are you headed out, right? Okay, 10 p.m. Well, actually, that'd be a late baseball game. 1 p.m. I'll be there, right? It's a quick, easy answer. Or a lot of times travel companies, right? Where are you headed for 4th of July weekend? I'm going to Cape Cod, right? Easy answer. But, something like, why are you going to Cape Cod this weekend? Well, why the heck is this brand asking me why I'm going to Cape Cod, first of all? And second of all, I don't know, it's the beach. Like, what do you mean, why am I going there? So that's for where and when. And also with wood, I think we see a lot of people saying, like, would you do this, or would you like this? What would you like to see us post on our page? Would you like to see us post more of this kind of content? I think a lot of people really love that. I think Ford is great at doing that, really helping their community shape the content itself and asking for feedback a lot.
So the political pollsters have been dumbing down the campaign messages. Every year things get a little bit more simple, and they test these different messages, and they try to have as few syllables as possible. I mean, is that sort of catching up with us here in a network like Facebook, where you got to dumb it down, you got to make it real simple, not too many syllables? That's where you're going to get the engagement. And if you want to have a meaningful conversation, Facebook ain't the place to do it. Is that the takeaway?
No, I don't think it's necessarily the takeaway, because we do see, some more complex stuff going on. This is all stuff in the wall. Keep in mind too, right? So a lot of times brands use the wall to drive people over to their page tabs where they may have video content or other things that's more dynamic, right? To get to your point where it's not just simple kind of stuff, right? Folks may be taking quizzes or polls or watching video exclusive content, getting a product launch. But I think, a lot of this ties back into just the news world, right? You're an editor of a podcast. I'm a former editor at MediaBistro.com, a pretty large media industry website, and even at Buddy Media, we write and produce a ton of content. So I think it's not necessarily a Facebook thing. I think it's really just a media thing, that we are now in the business of creating headlines and messages that spread, right? And you know very well that how you word your title of these podcasts gets people to click more and listen more, right? So for example, there was recently a news story on an industry blog that said Buddy Media CEO joins the board of Village Vines, right? Our CEO had joined the board of another company, and then within an hour, that headline was changed to, guess which hot company Buddy Media CEO just joined the board of, or something. It was something similar to that, and then had the big click to read more button, right? So and Huffington Post does this as well, right? They tinker with headlines in real time, and I think brands are doing the same thing. Obviously on Facebook, once you post, you can take it down, but so you can't. It's not like a blogging software where you can just tinker with things as easily. So I think I think a lot of the findings can be applied to other social networks or even just content creation in general.
When we return, who's more valuable? A Facebook friend, an email subscriber, or a Twitter follower? What's the best time to post to your Facebook page? And Facebook for B2Bs. Stay with us.
What I had seen was, you could do these webinars for an hour here and 2 hours there, and it just didn't feel like it was enough. I just felt like I needed to be more absorbed into something for a couple of days, just completely immerse myself. The hands-on nature was absolutely the home run for me, bringing my laptop. And as you're walking us through something, we are doing it, setting up our own blog or exploring Google Reader or whatever it was, to actually be doing that, because certainly I've been to computer-related courses before where you sit there with a book and a piece of paper, but not actually plugged in, and that was really valuable to me, to be doing it as we talked about it, so much better retention-wise. So that was good, lots of good resources. I bookmarked so many things and find myself, it's over a year later, I still refer to those bookmarks. And then it was just an interesting combination of people in the room. I mean, I'm this small, tiny little consulting firm, and I'm sitting next to the woman from Pepperidge Farms. And yet I felt like I learned from her, and I think she learned from me, and of course we all learned from you. So it was a really neat dynamic of who was in the room, even though we were a small group.
If you're ready to get serious about social media, train your people, train yourself. The war against digital illiteracy will not be won through social media conferences, keynotes, panel sessions, or PowerPoint. What's required is hands-on training. Join me for my upcoming hands-on training tour presented by Social Media Today. This September 2011, I'll be in Sydney, Singapore, London, Paris, Toronto, New York City, Chicago, and San Francisco. There's only 30 slots per session, and you can sign up at www.socialmediabootcamp.com. In September of 2010, so a little less than a year ago, ExactTarget, the email marketing company, did a survey of their customers and tried to determine who's more valuable, a Twitter follower, an email subscriber, or a Facebook fan. And I'll have a link to the blog post that eMarketer ran on it, where I have a couple of charts I'm looking at here. Basically, what they found was that 37% of Twitter followers are more likely to purchase from a brand after becoming a follower, while only 17% of Facebook fans were more likely to purchase from a brand after becoming a subscriber. And then they said on the Twitter, on the purchase intent side, that, and this is U.S. internet users who are more likely to recommend a brand after becoming a subscriber, fan, or follower. 33% of Twitter followers were more likely to recommend a brand after they followed it versus only 21% of Facebook fans. So, I mean, do you think there is an argument to be made that because Facebook is so big, because it has such, a large user base, that really, basically the lowest common denominator is going to equal it out, and you're just not going to get as much pull from that network than a network of more, earlier adopters like Twitter? Or do you think that's an inappropriate assumption?
I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at I remember obviously the ExactTarget study. I like, obviously it makes for a great headline, and people are very interested in that kind of stuff, comparing different platforms. I don't know their exact methodology, but you know what? When you talk to brands, right? They're not. I mean, you can't really say across the board Facebook's more valuable, right? Or email is more valuable than this, right? It's sort of comparing apples to oranges in a way. What I like to talk about with brands is like, what are they trying to do, and how does they use the different platforms to do that, right? And what I mean by that is, take for example a brand that we worked with, Pretzel Crisps that I mentioned earlier, right? Snack food, right? Not pretty simple brand, pretzels and chips combined, and they offered a coupon to their Facebook fan, buy one get one, and they didn't do any advertising around it, right? So they save a lot of money. Not having to obviously promote the coupon or the old way of putting it in the circulars or whatever, and they saw 58% and 83% redemption rates. One was for a buy one get one, and one was for $1 off. So that's actually people going into the store, associating with the brand, purchasing the product, versus off like no marketing spend. So that's what I'm interested in, is how, like, the specific examples like that, right? So then we don't talk about, what is Twitter more valuable than this, or if we would have done this on Facebook? Well, we did this thing, which is a coupon, and they're going to do more of those, and we can track the results of it. So, and I don't mean that as a cop-out answer. I think brands, in many ways are still, in some ways, in the early innings, and the ExactTarget numbers are interesting, and I don't know if it's because Twitter, they didn't really get into the findings too much here about whether it was because Twitter are early adopters or whatnot, or because Facebook has a much larger audience. So it's interesting, and I think it's going to continue to evolve. I think for every study that comes out, there's another study that says the opposite, right? So there's ones that say Facebook is higher. We've seen a gazillion studies that say a Facebook fan's worth $1, it's worth $130, it's worth $70, it's worth this. I mean, what's a fan to Ferrari versus a fan to Coke, right? And the two. One's a massive global consumer goods company that sells billions of dollars worth of products every day, and one is a car that costs, as many as a couple 100,000 Cokes.
But I know, like, my expectations of how I use Twitter versus how I use Facebook are very different. And typically I'll go to Twitter because I want to discover links to click through. And typically I'll go to Facebook because I want to stay in Facebook. I'm less likely, me personally, I'm less likely to click through from Facebook to some sort of a destination. And am I part of the majority, or are people just as willing to click through a Facebook page to a destination site as they would be, from a tweet?
Well, it's interesting, and again, it's different for different companies. One example that's really interesting, and they're a media company, so they're a little bit different. But Gawker Media, Nick Denton put out a great, put out their data. He put out their numbers, and this is a couple months ago, I believe. And he'll do occasional updates on this, so it'll be interesting to see if he does another update. He put out the Gawker Media numbers, and they're a network of, I believe, I don't know how many blogs they have now. I think around 10 blogs. And Facebook was just killing Twitter in terms of referral traffic for them. So much so that he, for a time, he even took off the Twitter share buttons and said, we're just going to put the Facebook share button on our sites. Forget about everything else. Facebook's driving the most traffic. So people were clicking through there for sure. I mean, obviously they're a content site, so they have, that's a little bit of an advantage. Obviously, that's what they're meant to do. Now they've since added the other buttons, right? They figure, well, why are we going to not have these other sharing buttons on our site? So I think, and when you talk to any media company these days, and a lot of brands as well, look at obviously e-commerce companies, Amazon's Facebook implementation and their work with Facebook Connect has, I think the numbers they put out, and this is a little bit dated, this is from last fall, so it'd be interesting again to see the updated numbers from Amazon. Just them more tightly integrating Facebook Connect made their referral traffic from Facebook go from 3% of their total traffic to 9% of their total traffic.
It's interesting. When we were at Le Web in Paris last year, and they did that Facebook boot camp, and I think it was Simon Cross who did a presentation of how La Repubblica, which is a major newspaper in Italy, had integrated the like button into the different soccer clubs that they cover. There's like 10 different soccer teams in Italy, maybe more. I'm sorry. I'm sure I'm going to offend some soccer fans somewhere.
Well, if you count the small ones, there's lots of them.
Okay. So basically the way it works is if you go to La Repubblica, you can hit the like button on a story for any of the individual teams, and then what you've done is you've subscribed to the news feed from that paper for all stories pertaining to that team. And Simon, we'll have a link in the show notes. I actually recorded this, and we've got a separate show on it. Simon said, he was quite clever. He said, it's kind of like RSS, but that people actually use. And so I think, this example of subscribing through media is really quite different because the product is, of course, the media itself. Whereas, if you're trying to sell hamburgers or snack food or motorcycles, that's a different thing.
Sure, and I agree. I think the other thing that is frankly interesting is that what a lot of journalists and a lot of journalists and people in the tech space, again, so people that we're not what I guess the average, we're not a good sample, right? But because we're devouring news all the time, have said, Twitter has replaced my RSS, right? It's my curated RSS feed. For some people that may be Facebook. I know, I was going to a music festival last summer, and I started following the festival on Facebook just for the heck of it, just to see what was going on. And they were posting all sorts of valuable stuff, like, hey, if you're headed out Friday at 4, traffic's going to be bad. Or if you're looking to, when you get here, here's where you're going to be able to get supplies and ice if you're camping this weekend and things like that. So to me, that's much better than getting a gazillion emails alerts, right? Or even a daily email, right? But if it's in my feed, I don't mind it as much. Now, again, that's just a personal example, and also it's something that I opted into. But I think that there's applications there for other brands too. Like, I think that, again, going back to Ford, they've done a lot of work with product announcements and different things on Facebook. So people are more open to, it'd be interesting to see some sort of, perhaps we could even look into this about, how people are using, Twitter versus Facebook as an RSS-like, service.
It's interesting, the level of sophistication required to appreciate as a communicator when to push out information, via a stream is sort of something we're all waking up to. This idea that people sort of manage their attention by dropping in and out of streams as it works for them. Actually, one of the most brilliant interviews I've ever done for this show was with Chris Messina, who is the open source advocate for Google, talking all about activity streams and how he believes as they become integrated into workflows, they'll essentially totally reform the way organizations collaborate, and I agree with him. Unfortunately, Wave was before its time. We'll see what happens with Google+.
Sure.
But what I'd like to do, there's just a few more things I want to cover before we wrap this up, and the first is the subject of timing. Dan Zarella was recently on the show talking about his report, The Science of Timing, and he basically said, if I remember correctly, that Facebook peaks pretty much between 5 and 8 p.m. Eastern time, and of course that's when all users are there. I know you guys sort of carved the data by industry. So what did you find out about the best time for brands to be marketing on Facebook?
Yeah, so basically in this, we found that really you want to look at the off-peak hours, right, when people are not at work, right? So a lot of the brands and pages are posting a lot during work hours, right? The community managers in the office, they're kicking out content. A lot of the engagement happens. We saw engagement spikes, 7, 8 in the morning before folks are going into work, and then also late night before
Eastern
bed,
time, right? All times
Yeah,
Eastern.
Yeah, 10, 11 at night. So but the thing is, we put out this report. One of the things we put out the report, and then some people said, well, that's different. I've seen big spikes here, and actually I've done this, and that's why we put the the caveat in here. Listen, this is one study. They are very large global brands, but again, like I said before, each community manager knows their brand best, right? So, for example, like we talk about, one of the brands we work with, the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, sports team, they have a little bit of an unfair advantage, but they had a game with the New York Giants. They had a big crazy comeback. I'm a Giants fan. That game was very painful to watch, where they came back from, I don't even know how, I think 4 touchdowns and won the game. And the Eagles saw more engagement because they were posting really frequently in that fourth quarter. They saw more engagement in that fourth quarter than they did, I think, the previous 3 games. So that's what we talk about a lot. It's like, yes, there are these times to post, right? So we have, for example, the auto industry, not posting a lot on Sunday when there's a ton of engagement on Sunday, right? People are out of work. Maybe dad's at home looking around on the net during his free time, right? So we see those trends like that, right, for different industries, but know your sweet spot. So we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles in that game. They could have posted every 2 minutes almost, right, because they had such high engagement. People were so obsessed with this game, after the game, the recaps, everything. And the same may be, for another big event your brand is involved in, right? Once you see those sort of sweet spots and people are engaging, max it out. Now, you don't want to hit people over the head with so much content, right? We see sometimes people on Twitter, I've heard a lot of folks tell me on Twitter, I can't follow this guy because he just live tweets too many conferences and events and whatnot. So you don't want to hit them over the head, but there are these key sweet spots. So automotive is one I mentioned. Entertainment, and the entertainment brands we looked at also were overlooking the weekend, right? People going to movies, people at home enjoying themselves. The brands were not posting as much, but even though there was higher engagement on their pages. Obviously, one of the things that we found interesting, of course, is travel. Right towards the end of the week, they have the highest engagement, right? Because people are looking forward to whatever weekend trips they may be going on. Again, that's our hypothesis. There could be other reasons as well.
Joe, talk to us. I mean, I've got to think that there have been a number of companies that have come to Buddy Media and said, hey, we want to get out there. We love this stuff. And, they're not the Eagles. They're not
Sure,
a consumer
sure.
brand. So talk to us about niche marketing or B2B marketing, or even marketing to consumers, a brand that's not so well known. I mean, how does all the same information apply? Or, how would your approach be different if you were working with a client like that?
Yeah, I mean, like Buddy Media is an example, and then, we're a B2B brand. I know that people do come to us for information about Facebook and social media marketing. So we try to be very cognizant of that. We take surveys of folks about what kind of content they want to see on our site. And on our Facebook page. We consider ourselves very much a news feed and educational resource for Facebook and social media marketing. So that's know your niche, right? So there are pages that are devoted to the most niche topics. Own it. And I think media companies now are very similar in the way that they'll have just the Apple blog, right? It's no longer the Tech Reporter. It's the Apple Reporter, right, or the Google blog, or Mac Rumors, right? Mac Rumors is a massive site, right, just off of Apple reporting. So I think for brands that are smaller in niche, it's own that niche, be that resource, and let people know that if they want information on that, they can go to your page to get it. I think it's pretty simple. I don't want to seem like I'm dumbing it down too much, but really it is pretty simple. And some of the brands did come to us, and started using that. One that I really wanted to mention is Ann Taylor, that used a lot of these. I mean, they're also a larger company and more well-known brand. But they're not, one of the top, they're not a Coke, they're not one of the top, most well-known brands in the world, but they're a solid brand, and they've been posting more on their page, just looking at some of the things we recommended around keywords and time of day and things, and they've seen their engagement increase more than 500% on their page since following some of the recommendations we made. So it's just amazing to see folks and brands like that really be able to do such good work in such a short time. One other thing from a separate study that I did want to mention is, now this is based off luxury brands only. So this is a little bit different. This is another study we put out with our partners at L2. They're a think tank out of NYU that works only with luxury brands, so luxury prestige brands. But I think there is some tie over as well here, but they said and this is something we sponsored with them. They did the research at NYU, but we partnered with them to release it. Brands that allow comments right on their page saw much higher engagement. So there are still some of the luxury and prestige brands that shut off commenting on their page. So obviously, you don't want to do that. And actually, Facebook is changing that. So come August 15th, you have to allow folks to comment on your items. They were originally holding off and making some exceptions for pharma companies and whatnot. Now really, there's a few small exceptions that I don't even want to get into the details. But for the vast majority, even pharma brands have to allow that engagement, because that's what Facebook's about. It's not about a one-way communication vehicle.
It's interesting. I heard Brian Solis interviewed by Shel Holtz on a recent episode of Forum Media Release. Brian was talking about a media audit that he had done for a major fashion brand. And he said, after doing this social media audit, it was clear to me that basically every single brand, every single major fashion brand sounds like a 16-year-old girl. So you could see how, sort of the highbrow marketers in Paris and New York might think, oh my God, how can we let these kids comment on our page? They're going to drag us down into the doldrums. But you're telling me now that really they're not going to have any choice.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets to, just if it comes to younger children, just being a good parent and watching over what they're doing online. Facebook doesn't, again, there had been some exceptions made for regulated industries. Now it's basically going away for almost everyone.
But what I'm saying is, I'm sure the brand geniuses at Prada and all these highfalutin fashion houses don't want to see OMG triple exclamation point, that type of vernacular associated with their brand. But I guess what you're telling me is they're not going to be able to hold out if they want to market on Facebook.
Nope. They're not.
So I guess they'll have to relax their standards on Facebook, and then maybe on the paid side, that's where they'll be able to present the type of image that they're more comfortable with, a more controlled image.
It's no, I mean that's a possibility for sure. I think that's why I think there's a lot of there's a lot of thinking around just how minors are best protected on Facebook, and something that brands have to think about, and it's something why Facebook doesn't allow you have to be 13 technically to get on the platform, but it's hard to enforce these kinds of things. That's why again it comes down to I think each individual and their family and whoever's responsible for them.
So let's wrap it up with a little discussion about social commerce and ad units and promos. Sure. I mean, more and more organizations are actually converting inside of Facebook. And I'll give you an example. One of the things Xavier Leclerc mentioned at Le Web when we were there was this new ad unit that they had, which was the like button ad unit. It really doesn't seem like that big a deal, but it really is, because in the past, ads were designed to transit you over to a landing page. But in the case of the like button ad unit, you click the like button and the brand has a persistent connection with you. Plus, you've recommended that brand in your newsfeed to your friends. And the light bulb went off when Xavier shared that with me. I was thinking, my gosh, no wonder they're valued at $50 billion. They've figured out a way not only to scale social media, but also to provide advertisers and marketers with demographics associated with those transactions, because, of course, everybody's got a profile. So on the promo side, you guys have this platform where you can actually run ads that are compliant, right, off the wall, inside of these canvases. And I guess now in the world of social commerce, are you actually including some sort of transactional opportunities in your platform?
Yeah, we are. I mean, really, we've looked off Facebook. We acquired a company called Spinback, 5 guys here in New York, building this awesome technology. So yes, that's what everyone wants to know, right? Likes are great, engagement's great, but what's it doing to my bottom line? To your point of like the point about landing pages and conversions and leveraging the social graph. But we're also looking off Facebook. So you walk into a room, right, and you ask any brand, okay, how many of you guys have, social sharing on your website? Almost everyone will raise their hand, right? The like button, Twitter share this, whatever it may be, right? There's lots of different, sharing buttons out there. Then you go, how many of you guys know what those shares are doing to drive sales, or what it means to your business, whether it's a sale or whatever the conversion may be? And almost all the hands go down, right? Because no one really knows. They know how many likes they're getting, maybe how much traffic, etc. So that's what we're looking into is, we can now say, okay, hey, Best Buy, the iPad 2 or this flat screen is the most shared product on your site. It's being shared most by women 35 to 44 in the Boston metro area. Oh, and by the way, each share on average is driving $2 in revenue to your company. So then it gets to the real, then the sort of CMO's eyes and ears light up when you can really tie it all the way back to conversions. Now again, there could be other conversions that a company is interested in besides just the sales. Maybe a brand wants to drive newsletter signups or drive other kinds of conversions. We can apply that to. So I think that's really interesting, and that kind of data is what brands are really wanting to know. What does this all mean to my bottom line?
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. It's been a very enlightening conversation.
Eric, thanks so much for having me. The pleasure's all mine.
You've been listening to On the Record Online with Eric Schwartzman, the podcast about how technology is changing the world of communications. To subscribe to the podcast or share feedback, visit us online at ontherecordpodcast.com, on Twitter at ontherecord, or send email to ontherecordpodcast@gmail.com. On the Record Online is hosted by Eric Schwartzman, an independent online communications consultant whose clients include the U.S. Department of State, the United States Marine Corps, the U.S. Embassy of Greece, the Government of Singapore, Johnson & Johnson, Toyota, Southern California Edison, the Environmental Defense Fund, and dozens of small to medium-sized organizations. For information about engaging Eric Schwartzman as a speaker, social media trainer, or digital strategist, visit www.ericschwartzman.com or send email to eric@ericschwartzman.com.